39 is just more of the, 10 rings and 8 curtains and 6 poles and that kind of stuff. If you go to the last verse of 39, so the sons of Israel, or the next to the last verse, so the sons of Israel did all the work according exactly to what the Lord had commanded Moses. And Moses examined all the work, and behold, they had done it just as the Lord had commanded. For this they had completed, and Moses blessed them. That's the end of chapter 39. So all that stuff, all that building, all that fashioning and molding and weaving and everything is done. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, chapter 40 is where I am. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Now on the first day of the month you shall set up the tabernacle, the tent of the meeting. And you shall place the ark of the testimony there. Ark of the covenant is what he's talking about. And you shall screen the ark with a veil, and you shall bring in the table and arrange what belongs upon it. And you shall bring in the lampstand and its mount and mount its lamps. Moreover, you shall set the gold altar of incense before the ark of the testimony, and you shall set up the veil for the doorway of the tabernacle. And you shall set the altar of the burnt offering in front of the doorway of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. And you shall set the laver between the tent of the meeting and the altar, and fill it with water. And you shall set up the court all around, and hang up the veil for the gateway of the court. And you shall take the anointing oil, and anoint all the tabernacle and all that is in it, and you shall consecrate it. All of its furnishings shall be consecrated and holy. And you shall anoint the altar of the burnt offering and all the utensils, and consecrate the altar, and the altar shall be most holy. And you shall anoint the laver and its stand, and you shall consecrate it. And you shall bring Aaron and his sons to the doorway of the tent of meeting, and you shall wash them all with water. And you shall put upon them the holy garments on Aaron, and anoint him and consecrate him, that he may minister to me as a priest. And you shall bring in his sons and put tunics upon them, and you shall anoint all of them, even as you had anointed the Father. And they may minister to me as priests. And their anointing shall qualify them for the perpetual priesthood throughout all generations. And thus Moses did, according to all that the Lord had commanded him. So he did. Now it came about in the first month of the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was indeed erected. And Moses erected the tabernacle and laid its sockets and set it up in its boards and inserted its bars and erected the pillars. And he spread the tent over the tabernacle, and he put the covering of the tent upon the top of it, just as the Lord had commanded him. And he took the testimony, and he put it into the ark, and attached the poles to the ark, and he put the mercy seat on top of the ark. And he brought the ark into the tabernacle, and set up the veil for the screen, and screened off the ark of the testimony, just as the Lord had commanded him. Then he put the table in the tent of the meeting on the north side of the tabernacle, outside the veil. And he set the arrangement of bread, in order that it may be before the Lord, just as the Lord had commanded. And he placed the lampstand in the tent of the meeting, opposite of the table on the south side of the tabernacle. That's how we knew, this is how we know where everything went, because he's pretty good about telling us. And he lighted the lamp before the Lord, just as the Lord had commanded him. And he placed the gold altar in the tent of the meeting in front of the veil, and he burned there fragrant incense upon it, just as the Lord had commanded. Then he set up the veil for the doorway of the tabernacle, and he set up the altar of burnt offering before the doorway of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting, and offered on it the burnt offering and the meal offering, just as the Lord had commanded. And he placed the laver between the tent of meeting and the altar, and put water in it for the washing of the priests. And from it Moses and Aaron and his sons washed their hands and their feet when they entered the tent of the meeting, and then when they approached the altar, they washed just as the Lord had commanded them. And he erected the court all around the tabernacle and the altar, and hung up the veil for the gateway of the court. Thus Moses finished all the work Then a great cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was no longer able to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it. And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And throughout all their journeys, whenever the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the sons of Israel would set out to journey. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not set out until the day when it was taken up. For throughout all their journeys, the cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and there was fire by night in sight of all the house of Israel. What do you think of that? Well, and that's partly why the Catholics always have that candle of the Lord burning somewhere in their sanctuary. If you walk into any Catholic church, somewhere, usually in the front of the sanctuary over the chancel area of the parapet, they'll have a tiny little candle somewhere, a little lamp somewhere burning, and that is to represent the presence of the Lord in the tent of the meeting. In fact, many of the early churches were based architecturally very much on this same construct of the tabernacle. In the olden days, nowadays, of course, they look like gymnasiums, but in the olden days, they look like a tabernacle. What do you think about this chapter? What strikes you about this chapter?
Details.
Nope.
That he did it all.
Nope. El Guapo, you okay? It's all right. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right.
Oh, Lord, have mercy on him.
El Guapo. And what did you bring, El Guapo? We brought you a plethora of presents. A plethora of presents? Tell me, what is a plethora?
Lots and lots.
El Guapo.
Are you quoting?
City Slickers. No, the Three Amigos. You ever see the Three Amigos?
The Three Amigos.
The Three Amigos. They had to go down to Mexico and fight the bad guy. El Guapo.
Everybody played for the Denver Broncos.
I don't know why that stuff gets stuck in my brain, but it just does. And then that hat brings it out. I haven't thought about that in 30 years.
Martin Short, Chevy Chase.
Yeah, when they fought El Guapo.
The guy with the crazy eyes.
I need you to sow, old woman. Sow like the wind. Sitting there on a sewing machine. Sow like the wind, old woman. No, that's not about this chapter. What strikes you about this chapter?
No, run George Clooney.
Well,
Hey, look what I got.
Oh my God, you got a pocket.
Wow. Excuse me, pal. I'm going uptown.
Well, what's second about this chapter is a fine obedience without
All right, there you are. You're in the ballpark. Say it.
obedience without
Question.
questions.
Exactly.
Okay.
You know,
Fine obedience follow instructions.
having that coffee.
nothing. Donna Shade came by yesterday to the office, or Friday. She's getting the financial whatever reports. And she goes, well, how do you feel? And I said, I feel great. Why? And she goes, well, you still kind of don't look so good. And I said, no, Donna, this is real me. I've always looked like crap.
You look much better than you did last time.
So last Sunday I was struggling a little bit. Trying to get through that service was more than I bargained on. And then I went over and ate a buffalo burger. That was a mistake. El Guapo. Stay away from the buffalo bomb.
Well, I got haggis
Carol ate
burrito yesterday.
Carol ate haggis last night. And I told her what it was, and she wished she hadn't.
It's sheep.
Huh?
It's sheep.
No, it's meat that's cured in the belly of a sheep.
Well, it was good. Well, what is it?
Haggis. Now, I did have some shepherd's pie. Tom brought that by, and that was really good. So, anyway, what's in the chapter? Talk to me. Unquestioning obedience is correct. Look how many times that it says, and remember, the Lord's Word, if it is in fact infinite and forever and not one iota passes away, why would God say something 27 times? If He says something 27 times in a chapter, He probably wants you to take a notice of that.
Yes, I agree.
And over again you see, thus Moses did all that the Lord commanded him.
Yes.
And then the expletive, or the emphasizer, is so he did. Unquestioning obedience. How many of us wish we had children like that? You know?
I wish I had it. Her family that were that way.
The point is, you know, how many times is Mom gonna, how many times I gotta tell you? Well, you know, 100 times a day times however long they're gonna live. That's your answer. That's how many times you're gonna tell them. Why? Because they don't listen, and even when they do listen, they don't hear. And even if they do hear, they got something better to do. So, consequently, we're sitting there the rest of our whole lives since the first birth of our child saying, how many times I gotta tell you? Well, you know, how long do you plan on living? Times 100 times a day, and there's your answer. But in the case of Moses now, he does everything, and you see it over and over and over and over again, and God blesses him mightily. Why does He bless him? Well, faithfulness is a part of it, simply because you're not going to be obedient unless you're faithful, right? I mean, if I'm faithful to you, I'm going to do what you need, or do what you say, do what you ask. And I'm going to see to it that everything is taken care of as, you know, was discussed. But if I'm not faithful to you, if I, you know, Vicky's a nice girl, but I don't want to listen to her. Well, what are the odds I'm going to go through all that trouble and all that effort, all that energy, all that investment of myself and my riches or my resources to take care of what you want? Well, I'm not, right? You look like I did last week. Don't talk to Donna. Gee, Tom, you still look like crap. Well, that's just me. I've always looked that way. Anyway, the point is, you know, we always talk about faith and faithfulness, right? Well, how do we prove faith or faithfulness? The answer to that question is simple. Obedience. When God says, gather in the assembly of the righteous for the reading of the Word, for the purpose of prayer, for the singing of hymns, and for the edification, lifting up of one another, that's really not an option. It's not a suggestion. It is a command. If you are my son, believe in Jesus the Christ, then you will gather in the assembly of the righteous. In other words, go to church. Well, I don't got to go to church. I can pray to God in my boat. You can. You can pray to God in your boat. But you can't be obedient to God in your boat. Because He says it's not just about you. El Guapo needs to meet with Crazy Mary. Crazy Mary needs to snuggle up to Scrawny Girl. You see what I'm saying here? It's all about all three of you. And when you gather together and the Lord is there and you join together and you mutually edify one another, that strengthens everybody. When Vicky's feeling bad and we gather around and say, yeah, we're sorry you're feeling bad. Ooh, don't get near me. When we support Vicky, then that's beneficial for her, but it's also beneficial for us. You know, one of the greatest lessons I've learned in my life, you know how you get good at biblical studies and understanding? You know how you get good at that? Teaching others. Because when you're teaching others, you're reviewing that stuff over and over and over. Now, I know you look at me and say, well, Chandler, you're a professional theologian. You're supposed to know this stuff. Yeah, but do you know how many ministers are preaching? They ain't got a clue what's in this book. A whole bunch of them. 90% of them to this day and age haven't got a clue. They're the be good attitudes and they bat the eyes and all that nonsense. Very few of them know what's in this book. The only reason I know what's in this book is A, I studied this book. But B, I've taught this book forever. Most of you in this class have sat in Bible studies for 32 years since we've been here. And you've taken Revelation like 9 times. Okay? Figure it out. God wins.
2 or 3.
And you've been through these books over and over and over again. And you say to me, Tom, you didn't teach it that way last time. There's new stuff to be found. There's new ore to be mined, if you will. There's new tastes to be savored.
Well, this
That's
book,
Donald Coppage. That's not me. Oh, I feast upon the rib roasts of Romans.
this book is
Had
like
8-point
no
hat.
other.
I always had hat envy. Go ahead.
This book is like no other. You can read it and find new things.
You can.
Absolutely.
You can. That was Donald Coppage. Savor the flavors of the rib roast of Romans. He went to Oxford. Had his little 8-point hat. I had hat envy. I only had 4 corners on mine. 8.
Just for the record, I still don't like the creepy, crawly stuff.
Creepy crawly stuff.
No matter what.
You've obviously never been in my son's bedroom. Talking about creepy crawly. Anyway, faithfulness can only be proved by obedience. And that obedience, if it's true obedience, must be unquestioned. Unless, and this is where you get sketchy because some theologians will agree, some will not, unless it poses a personal danger. Well, in this case, the personal danger to Moses was not to do it. So that might have been part of his motivation, I'm not sure. But in doing so, he's greatly blessed. So it's probably better to be obedient and do what the Lord asks you to do than to blow him off and say, I'm not really up for this. Or I've got something better to do. Or I've got tickets to Disney World. Who would go to Disney World? I was out there heaving axes. Ah!
Did you?
Oh, yeah. Just line up and stand there and they give you all a shot.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I saw the big.
was heaving axes, man. It's great. But you know what? Give me an HK-45 any day. I don't care how many swords you're wearing, pal. There's one guy had like 9 swords on him. I said, what are you, an octopus? One will do. Anyway, neither here nor there. And there was an old guy, looked exactly like Gary. Even had the same limp as Gary. And we sat down on the side of the lake there, like the amphitheater, and the music's down there. And we sat there on a big blanket, Gary and Carol and I, and we sat there and we listened to music all night. It was wonderful. And the other guy sat right in front of us. It was like if you held a mirror up, and that was Gary right there. And that guy got up, kid you not, struggled just like Gary to get up, started walking out. It'd be like Thursday before he gets home. Kid you not, an hour before we left, and we caught up to him about 100 yards outside the gate. He was still... I looked at Gary and I said, damn, you're not the slowest, are you? Passed this guy by. Fuzzy white beard, fuzzy white hair, big belly, looked exactly like Gary. It was hilarious. You aren't the slowest. I always thought you were. Anyway, so this chapter, as we close it up, throughout all the adventures and all the bringing them out of Egypt, bringing them through the desert, providing for them when there's no provision, giving them food where there's no food, giving them healing and water where there's no healing and water, taking care of them, fire by night to keep them warm, cloud by day to keep them cool, all the way down to where God says, build me a tent of meeting where I can be represented in your presence at all times. They do that, and the Lord ends it by blessing them mightily at this time because of why?
They obeyed.
They did what God told them to do. 99.99% of the time, if you do what God asks you to do, even though trials may come, even though tribulation may follow, even though others may rise up against you, like Jesus said, they hated you, they hated me, they're going to hate you. But even though you do all of that stuff, when you are obedient to God, it's going to work out. It's going to be okay, so to speak. Remember Mom hugging you saying, it's going to be okay. Well, if you believe in God, that's exactly what it is. Jesus said, regardless of the headaches, the persecutions, they drag me before governors, they're going to drag you before governors, they're going to beat up you, they beat up me, they killed me, they're going to kill you. But regardless of all that, do not fear the world, for I've overcome the world. Remember that verse of Jesus, very popular. What did he mean by that? He says, you know what? When all else fails, do what the Lord would have you do. If you're not sure what the Lord would have you do, ask Him. James makes it most plain when he says, if any of you lack wisdom, what should you do? Ask of God, who grants it how?
Mightily.
Abundantly. He doesn't just say, well, here's a clue, figure it out. You want to know what He wants? He'll tell you what He wants in no uncertain terms. That's His promise to us. Our promise to Him then is to take that advice, heed those words, and do it. And do it. When it says forgive your brother, forgive your brother. When it says make peace with your family, then go to the altar and sacrifice, make peace with your family and go to the altar and sacrifice. Stop holding the grudge. Stop holding the hate. Stop holding... All of that is disobedience to the Lord. When He says reach out and care for one another as I've cared for you, love one another as I've loved you, give a damn about somebody other than yourself, then do it. Well, he doesn't deserve it. She doesn't deserve it. I give all my stuff to them. That was not ever part of the equation. He says love, care, even love your enemies. Remember that nonsense? I raised a few eyebrows when Jesus said, I say love your enemies. You've heard it. Kill your enemies. I say love your enemies.
That's right.
Because if you love your enemies, you're going to make them not an enemy eventually. They may respond positively, they may not. But that doesn't relieve you of the command to love the enemy. So this is the purpose. And the only way to prove faithfulness is, well, two things, two factors. First is, as we said, unquestioning obedience. But second of all, time. Time. You go, what do you mean by that, Tom? Well, I liken it unto Carol and Maya's wedding. When we got married 100 years ago, back in 78 or whatever, I pledged to her in the wedding ceremony that I'd love her for the rest of my life. Now, how did she know that on that day? She did. I mean, it sounds good, doesn't it? It's very noble. Oh, you'll love me for the rest of his life. You know, it's just good rhetoric, basically. Oh, yeah, I'll be your friend forever, BFFs. The average length of a BFF is like about 2 months. And then they hate each other for whatever reason. 40 years later now, I tell Carol I love her and I'm going to live with her until the end of time. Can she believe that a little more now than on the day when I told her?
Of course.
Probably. The only difference between me now, other than I've gotten a little heavier, and then, is 40 years have passed. All the headaches, all the trials, all the tribulations, all the times I wanted to leave the hell out of here. Take those nasty little babies you made and go away. 40 years later now, she can say, I mean, I don't know that she would, but if you asked her, she'd say, oh yeah, Todd's my husband, he's faithful. You know, he's not leaving me, he's not going off on some dumb adventure. So time is a critical element here. Time. You say you love Jesus, okay, I have no reason to doubt that. Now, show me. So all Christians are from Missouri. Show me. The show me state. Jesus says it quite plainly. A good tree will give good fruit. You know what he's saying there? Show me. A good spring will produce what? Good water. A bad spring will not produce good water. A bad tree will not produce good fruit. There's your faith right there. Faith is shaped or defined by two things: time and obedience. You know why an orange tree produces oranges every year?
Because it's an orange tree.
Because it's an orange tree. Brilliant. That's amazing, right? Nobody goes out there and tells it to produce. The tree doesn't say to the farmer, hey, I've produced for the last 3 years, I'm not going to do any more. You know, that doesn't happen. It produces oranges because it's an orange tree. El Guapo, gather the men. I meet you twice times 5 days. Many men, many guns. We see you on the ridge.
Oh, in the name of Jesus. Help me,
In the
Lord.
name of Jesus. I meet you. Little resort called Alamo. Meet you at Alamo. Lord, see, there's my trial and tribulation. About 30 years ago, that walked into my life. I haven't been able to get rid of it since. It almost killed me twice. Of course, I almost killed her once, too. She's one up on me. I was standing on her oxygen line. I didn't know that. She's going, what's wrong with you? Oh, sorry. Man, she has not changed her cologne in 30 years either. Whew. Eau de toilette or whatever it is. Alright, that's faithfulness. That's whether you're going to accomplish the job and get blessed by the Lord or fail the Lord and be outside of His blessing. Jesus said it most poignantly to Judas Iscariot. What you do, do quickly. What you decide, decide quickly. You don't have to betray me. But if you want to, that's fine. What you do, do quickly. And you know the Psalm 127. Anyway, one of the Psalms says, by your life, prove your faithfulness to God. Or by your death, it will decide against you. In other words, as long as you have breath, you have opportunities to be faithful to God. If you choose not to, then the death will decide that for you. One way or another, a decision will be rendered. And all the people were happy right up until the day the Lord closed the door of the ark. And then 3 times in one little chapter you see the horrible phrase, all life outside the ark perished. All life outside the ark perished. All life outside the ark perished. Everybody in the ark was fine. Nobody fell overboard. Nobody got yanked overboard. Nobody died on board. They all came out to a new wonderful life. But all life outside the ark. And Jesus said, you know how it's going to be? It's going to be just like in the days of Noah. People are going to be partying and marrying and eating and drinking and being given in marriage. They're going to do everything they want to do right up until the day the Lord closed the door. Remember, that door was huge. Noah couldn't have opened it if he wanted to. Right up until the day the Lord closed the ark. Therefore, Jesus says, set your house in order. Keep your house in order. The day and the hour, nobody knows. You're just not given that. And you never will be. So when people say, here's the end, Jesus says, never mind that nonsense. You set your house in order and keep it in order for today, because that's all you got, today. And you worry about today. Today has enough troubles of its own, said the Lord. You deal with today. Not tomorrow, not yesterday. Today. Be faithful. Let me say it better. Be obedient today. You know, we throw faith around so much, it's become just meaningless. Be obedient today. That's a better way to say it. Because if you're obedient, you will be faithful. Alright? That's the end of Exodus. We will start a new study next week. Something a little shorter than 40 chapters.